everyone, this is update for November 22, 2023, day 637 of the war and of the date update. Now this is also catch up for November 20th and 21. As you can see, I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on inside of Ukraine. Basically, power struggle that's happening in Ukraine right now, and so I'm showing you two kind of like factions, two group. One is with the head of Ukrainian military, and then this is the spokesperson for Ukrainian Air Force, and another group is, as you can see, this is basically member of the parliament and talking head for Ukrainian president. So basically, when he wants to do, make any, let's say, not so intelligent statements or do basically something that's unpopular, usually this person is basically used like a ram for those purposes. And then this is general in Ukrainian army who is basically effectively Ukrainian president's puppet. He is in overwhelming minority within the army. He's not very popular, but nevertheless, there's some very small influence of Ukrainian president at the high level in the Ukrainian army. However, majority of the army is definitely aligned with the head of Ukrainian army that you can see here. So, so what happened a couple of days ago? There was already a direct fight, actually on Facebook, between the spokesperson of Ukrainian Air Force and this, I would say, she's effectively like a political commissar of Ukrainian president in Ukrainian army. So the spokesperson accused this political commissar of discrediting head of Ukrainian military. Basically, there was a verbal exchange. And the spokesperson ended up unfriending this political commissar, talking head. So as you can see, there is a more and more clear delineation between the two sort of sides of the conflict, and basically it's going in it ripples through the military political structure, where everybody is starting to be aligned with one side or another. Obviously, political side is fully controlled by Ukrainian president because he has, puppet parliament where he has majority, so he de facto, controls everything. This struggle will sort of accelerate, will intensify as things will be developing on the battlefield, because the difficult situation on the battlefield, strategically difficult, is intensifying this conflict. One of the reasons probably why there were visits from the U.S. Minister of Defense from the U.S. came, then Minister of Defense from Germany came, a couple more. I think politicians from the West came to actually speak to both. Apparently, there is an attempt to to bridge the gap between the two fighting factions and kind of like make them to have peace, because obviously it might create problems on the front line. I don't think it's going to be successful, because this conflict is sort of is very fundamental in nature, where basically Ukrainian president is representing effectively incompetence, lack of intelligence, and resulting corruption from there, and as a result, there's no way that he can reconcile with this sort of military side that's also not the brightest people, but at least they I would say more patriotic from that perspective. So there's this kind of separation between the two, um, and unfortunately the struggle will sort of intensify over the time. By the way, on this political commissar, this is like a truly commissar. She has no background in military, not even no knowledge, no understanding. She is basically pediatrician, so basically child doctor. So she has no idea what she's doing, what she's asking for. Nevertheless, she's willing to do whatever she's told to do, and that's what really Commissar is about. Now let's move to the situation on the battlefield. As a general strategic situation, as I mentioned before many times, things are developing slowly but surely, not in Ukrainian favor strategically. And that's really a result of the fact that Russia is 4 times larger. It's able to source some of the material from Iran, apparently from North Korea, probably from China, and simply the size matters in this case. Um, and as I mentioned before, it's war of attrition. The problem for Ukrainian side is that it's not trying to do to become sort of to develop advantage in terms of quality. It's basically also relying on quantity. So that's why I talk about this two Soviet armies, and where the both Soviet army really relies on the quantity, right? So that's the sort of strategical approach there, and unfortunately, Ukrainian army is in that way, and the whole country. And there is also like huge amount of corruption that prevents resources from being used efficiently, which is corruption is enemy of the qualitative advantage, and corruption is a symptom, as I said before. It's not a root cause of the problem. It's a symptom of basically low intelligence. That's really where it's all stemming from. So Ukrainian army essentially losing the biggest sort of challenge that's going to be becoming more and more apparent is the Ukrainian army is losing one of its biggest advantages is the quality of people, motivation of the average soldier on the battleground, the quality, sort of motivated soldiers getting killed, wounded, and so on. And what you get is replenishment, people who are less and less motivated. And to be fair, it's nearly impossible to blame them because they see this rampant corruption that's being, shown by Ukrainian president and his political circle, and they don't see why they should sacrifice for corrupt political system that doesn't work for them, essentially, because they understand that this they can project the future, and they understand, let's say Ukraine wins, they're gonna live in this corruption system, and this is not what Ukrainian people want, what they are fighting for, and that's really a huge demotivating factor for Ukrainian population, and that's why you probably see a lot of people trying to flee to the west from Ukraine. I'm talking about potential male soldiers and people just trying to avoid going into the army at this point at all. Opportunities. And again, this is not. This is the people are not the problem. It's sort of a symptom again of what I said is of the corruption and low intelligence at the top of Ukraine that leads to this corruption in basically average person doesn't align himself or herself with that, and they don't see why they should sort of sacrifice their life for a system like that. And so that's the biggest challenge for Ukraine, because Ukraine start to have dwindling number of soldiers on the front line, while Russia can continue pumping up their number of soldiers, which they've been doing. Yes, a lot of them are not sort of high, like they're not high quality and so on, but that's okay. That's the part that's sort of expected as part of Russia's strategies. They don't have plans to have the best quality soldiers, most motivated. They just use again quantity, and they understand that even just in this approach, they're gonna win eventually, and that's their long term. That's Russia's long term strategy in this war. But and again, I want to highlight that this is not war for this captured territories. This is war for entire Ukraine. The Russia wants to gain control of the entire Ukraine, not just sort of piece of it. Now I'm going to switch to the walk through the front line. I'm going to start in clockwise fashion, as I always do, starting from very north. Situation along the state border remains quiet in quotes, meaning there is nothing really of strategic importance going on there. Now let's move to the North Donbass front line. Things here also fairly quiet, only some pressure here, like sort of northeast of Kupiansk. Again, this is all tactical pressure. Otherwise, situation here is stable and I would say fairly quiet. Now let's move to the North Donbass front line. Things here are also quiet. In the northern sector, it's always been fairly quiet. Similar actually situation in the southern sector. Actually, I want to draw attention that this Azov brigade is actually it's sort of not correct name. I would call it division at this point, because it's about 8,000 people. It's probably on a small, well, I guess, typical Soviet division of the World War II, size-wise, a little bit, but we can call it a division at this point, although it's still called brigade. Now let's move to central Donbass front line. Things here remain the same. Russian command continues to put pressure around Avdiivka. Again, as I said, it's baby bites by Russian side, but every couple days there is sort of baby bite happening, and eventually it will make it nearly impossible for Ukrainian forces to keep Avdiivka. And I'll just kind of look through how this thing's developing here. So this is a couple days after initial attack. This is further advances on November 4th. The key here is this crossing of this railroad here, essentially approaching this coal coking plant by Russian forces. Then another important development recently was crossing of the railroad here in the northwestern direction. This advances here are fairly, I would say, they don't really sort of matter as much. I would say at this point is, if my assessment on this situation is fairly negative for Ukrainian side, because as I said, Russian forces, they doing this baby bites in Russian command is persistent and wants to continue using resources to do that. And the way it is, this peninsula, it's really hard to hold on to. because effectively Russian side has ability to disrupt supply of troops and weapons and ammunition inside of this peninsula. It's difficult, let's put this way. And if the bites will continue, it will become progressively more difficult. The only answer to this is actually counterattack, and actually not counterattacks the way they done by Ukrainian command, where they just try to basically counterattack on these flanks here at the sort of base of this peninsula. It's probably better to do some attacks, from this area ceramic and towards south, or even here if possible. But basically you really need to have a very well working offensive machine, and Ukrainian army is not capable of doing true offensive, true attacks, even if it's tactical attacks. What is Ukrainian army is doing, and Ukrainian command is responsible actually for that, it's essentially like small group infiltrations, which is it's not really attack. It's sort of in some way it's kind of like unique way of doing fighting, but it's simply not gonna work. In this case, you really need to have counterattack of meaningful size, and unfortunately Ukrainian army is not capable of doing it. So what this really leads to is that Russian side will be sort of biting this apple little by little, eventually chewing up Avdiivka, and that's unfortunate, I would say, prognosis for this situation here, unless for whatever reason Russian command decides to abort this because of the losses are too high, or whatever other reasons they can do it. That's the only sort of saving grace for Avdiivka, and so it remains in Ukrainian hands. Otherwise, at this pace, probably by spring or whatever, sometime in the spring, it's probably gonna be lost, maybe even faster. It's very hard to predict, but the sort of end destination is very clear in this case. Now let's move to Zaporizhya front line. Oh, and I forgot to mention one other thing is that Russian military is actively using cluster bombs, and specifically around Avdiivka. So they're really ramping up use of cluster bombs, and obviously that's, if you're not prepared, very unpleasant weapon. Now let's look at Zaporizhya front line. Things here are very, very low activity. Some Russian attacks to regain lost ground. Again, very small scale, very sort of, I would say, weak. The same is happening around this Robotyne. Actually, Ukrainian forces still do this small group infiltrations, so small group attacks against the Russian forces, which don't lead anywhere. It's not even clear what's the point of this whole attacks here, since it's very clear that this whole so-called offensive has been aborted, and there is no strategic opportunity there. But nevertheless, because it's effectively turning into waste of Ukrainian resources at this point. Again, the end situation, it's a status quo here, and probably gonna remain relatively quiet section of the front line for some time. Now let's look at the situation along the Dnipro River. Things here are also status quo. Basically, Ukrainian command, and as I would say, it's a blame on command, is not capable of actually breaching out or expanding decisively this bridgehead around Krinky, and what Russian side is doing, they're also not capable of eliminating this bridgehead, so they're just basically using bombs to attack it, and cluster bombs as well. And so basically, this is a stalemate here. And the way it's being done, executed by Ukrainian command, there is no chance of meaningful success here. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Until next time. Bye bye.